Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me I got Mac.
Good evening.
Unfortunately, Gio is unable to join us tonight, but don't worry, guys. Mac and I will cover a lot in our podcast for today. We're going to be going over the midweek action from the Champions League. We'll do a quick reaction to the Europa League games as well, and preview the key matches coming up this weekend. Before we get into it, though, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is @houseo_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Mac, let's dive straight in. We had the second leg of the quarterfinal matches for the Champions League this midweek. And the first game we're going to touch on now, I think a very, very interesting game. Finished AC Milan 1, Napoli 0 in the reverse fixture. Napoli were home this time, and as we expected, they came out needing a goal, and so on the front foot. Osman came back for Napoli as well, which was a welcome sight for those Napoli fans. How did you see that, I guess, the first bit of exchange and the first half go?
Overall, in the first half, you definitely felt the intent from Napoli there, where they knew that they were desperate in terms of needing to be able to come back. They were on top of the play. They dominated the ball, created a majority of the opportunities. It seemed like it was just a matter of time before they're going to kind of break the deadlock. Unfortunate for them, AC Milan were still very effective on the counter, and you want to be able to give a lot of credit to. I was touching on this prior to our podcast, where both left wingers, Krasavella and Rafael Leao, were actually leaving torturous days for Calabria and De Lorenzo, respectively, for AC Milan and Napoli. Where Rafael, on those moments, he had so much space to work with on the counter. Whereas Napoli, you could see they were kind of bogged down and just trying to be able to break through the defensive structure that AC Milan did have. And unfortunately for them, they left it too late. But overall in the first half, it kind of fit the script specifically to what AC Milan would have wanted, where they're comfortable playing defensively. Well, most of the chances they could come from outside of the box, from long-range shots. And in key moments, they were able to get out on the break and isolate their go-to player, their talisman, on the left-hand side, and were very effective in doing so.
Yeah, let's dive straight into some of the action. 20 minutes in, Rafael Leao, as you touched on it, very, very bright for for AC Milan, goes through and is fouled right at the top of the box after passing it to, I think it was Brahim Diaz on the right-hand side there. I guess, you know what, it's given as a foul anywhere on the pitch, so if it's in the box, it should also be given as a penalty kick. But I'm kind of surprised that Giroud was the one stepping up to take that penalty kick, Mac. I'm going to be honest, I don't watch as much of the AC Milan games, but I didn't expect it would be Olivier Giroud, which, as we know now, Murray, the goalkeeper for Napoli, made a great save from that penalty, and Giroud had a couple chances himself after the break, like you mentioned, and was finally able to put one away. The one where one of the players I kind of jokingly mentioned last week, and Ndombele, his mistake led to Rafael Leao literally just taking it upon himself to go through the whole AC Milan right side defense, put a ball through to Giroud, and that's what you get from Leao. How important is it to have someone like that, especially on a counter-attacking style, Mac, for AC Milan? What do you think about that passage of play?
Rafael is kind of a system breaker in a lot of ways when you're playing these teams in possession, where as long as he can be isolated out wide against a kind of an overlapping attacking team, he's going to have so much space in behind where it looks like he's cutting through as like a knife through butter. It's completely easy for him to be able to find the seat passes in the space. Playing against a team that is much more defensive, considering his technical ability and his pace and his ability to get in behind, it's not going to show as much, and that's why you probably saw Krasavella, who's a similar type of player, but did not kind of have those breakout moments as frequently as Rafael did. And so he, in AC Milan's game plan, is absolutely vital, where these kind of more attacking, imposing, kind of tiki-taka-esque teams that are trying to be able to build up from the back, kind of press very high, win the ball back in the final third. If you can have them on the break, they're going to be, as I said, break the other team's system and be able to make sure that they can get at them. We saw a very similar experience, at least what goes to my head with this type of player. This might be couple levels down from Rafael Leao, but Saint Maximin for Newcastle against Manchester City earlier on in the season just screams that to me. Against these high pressing teams, if you have that winger can get in behind, that's very technical, can beat their player one-on-one, they're going to create a domino effect where their other players are going to be continuously out of position. And you saw him create opportunity for his teammates and again, and to be able to even first win the penalty himself, where he actually put the ball through Mario Ruiz legs, which was absolute class, and still be able to kind of make a decent pass off of it at the same time. So it's overall, he's the type of player where he can kind of drag your team through some of these heavier competitions, and why, in my opinion, AC Milan have played so well against Napoli, not just in this fixture, not just in the last fixture, but in all their meetups in this last month. So overall, he's a very key player. In terms of the point for Giroud, I completely agree with you. You are a Giroud lover. I am a Giroud hater. It is what it is. But you got to give him credit, because he did miss the penalty. He kept his confidence high to be able to kind of stick his other opportunities away. But he was consistently a threat in the box, where if there's a player either being Diaz on the right-hand side or Rafael Leao on the left-hand side, he's a presence in the box where, okay, we've kind of brought the ball up the pitch. If we wait too much longer in terms of kind of building an attack, we're going to be in a position where we can't break down this team. So if we can kind of just shove it in the box and Giroud's going to be able to compete against a back line that's missing a key player, we're going to take the opportunity there. So full credit to Giroud there. And he's definitely kind of a compliment to what he's able to do with Rafael, who he plays similarly in a lot of ways to his relationship with Mbappe for France. There's a lot of good parallels there. So overall, I feel like that duo can cause a team like this a lot of damage, and they did in this fixture.
Yeah, for sure. I love how you mentioned, well, you briefly mentioned Kvaratskhelia and his sort of the struggles that he found in this game. And I think he didn't have his best game, but he still had his chances. And then you saw him having a couple of chances, especially right in the beginning of the second half. But I do have to give credit, Mac, to AC Milan, who on that right-hand side with Krunic and Calabria, every time he got the ball, he was doubled. And, Osman's first game back in the Champions League from that injury. But Tomori and Kier, who I've had a little bit of a doubt for, hey, they stood their game and they had a great sort of defensive display against Osman, who previously against, I guess, any other Serie A team would cause a lot of problems. In this game, whether it was because the Napoli wingers and midfielders weren't able to provide a good enough service, or it looked like it was a bit of both. The defending was great, and just missing the lack that final pass for Osman to sort of get on the end of on that. So unfortunately, they couldn't create much apart from the 80 minutes in, where Tomori handles the ball from that Di Lorenzo cross, which arguable, Mac. Tomori's going down and he makes his case. Where else is he supposed to put his hand because he needs to break his fall? And so I think it is questionable, the penalty, and another opportunity to mention Mike Maignan and how great he's been for AC Milan after coming back. Makes that save and essentially shuts out Napoli. They eventually get one back at the end of the game, but how big was that save at that time for AC Milan?
Absolutely vital, because the key part it's just in regards to the bigger part than even in some ways, it's the timing. Because if in the 82nd minute they're still assuming at a time afterwards with that penalty miss, that momentum completely shifts. And the last 10 minutes is going to be even more chaotic for AC Milan, where Napoli going to have that belief. It's like, hey, we have an opportunity here. Can we create one more chance? So that penalty save, which was phenomenal, both penalty goalkeepers made great penalty saves in this game. That save really potentially killed the momentum. So even though later on that Napoli did kind of pull back the goal, it was so late into the game that it kind of really shut the door in a lot of ways, where that penalty goes in. Very likely that goal still happens, considering how the rest of the game had played out anyway. It isn't as if in the situation where you see sometimes where a goal happens and then you can make the argument that the whole game would change differently. No, I would argue that AC Milan will still try to be able to withdraw, play very defensive. They still have their lead, so they should still feel comfortable. And then that opportunity through a corner kick is going to happen again. So that is absolutely vital, and is really what kind of saved AC Milan to be able to pull through this tie. high. I would say Emmanuel has given himself a case to a lot of clubs. I know European-wise are looking at him to be able to make an additional move considering his play style. I'll find it hilarious if he's an automatic shoe-in to be able to go to Tottenham to replace Hugo Lloris. That would kill me. Just replacing both nationality and club would absolutely kill me. But AC Milan have a hell of a keeper on their hands, and that's definitely brought them through the semifinals for sure.
Yeah, well, that being said, we're gonna just move on, I guess, because there's more games to go on. At the end, AC Milan were 2-1 winners on aggregate, and so AC Milan are through. The next quarterfinal game that took place was Chelsea Real Madrid, and in this game, a little bit started with I was a little bit confused. That lineup, I'm sure you saw it, Mac. Very questionable for Chelsea, given the fact that they needed to score, and they left players such as Sterling, Joao Felix, Callum Mudryk on the bench, and they started with 3 at the back, which, in a game where you need to score, that's not the best approach, I would argue. But how did you see this game, Mac?
Overall, I do agree in terms of the initial lineup. It's kind of left me scratching my head a little bit in terms of, okay, the intention is to play a 3-man midfield of Fernandes, Kovacic, and Conte, all who are arguably in their best positions as defensive holding midfielders, either playing as more of a 6 or in Kovacic plays more likely an 8, and then just Gallagher and Havertz really as your only attacking options, and arguably neither of them are wingers or even strikers. So it's really the whole lineup to start out was, we're not going to play a striker or a winger throughout the entire pitch in all actuality. However, for large sections of this early game, Chelsea were the much better team. They created a lot of opportunities. Conte missed a clear opportunity, the one that screams out to me. Havertz had a couple good opportunities. Enzo Fernandez had a shot from outside the box. I know Conte ended up missing, I think it's before the end of the first half, another kind of clear opportunity that was kind of blocked by Militao. So Chelsea were causing Real Madrid a ton of problems, which was a little bit surprising to me considering that lineup where you saw that disparity. But it's just kind of the same old Chelsea that we've talked about, where they have those opportunities it's at least an improvement that they're creating the opportunities. I do want to give them that. Expected goals coming out of this game, they ended up slightly edging out Real Madrid, so in all likelihood they should have won the fixture if you based off that, which I understand that there are some flaws to that stat, but it does show that they have more attacking intent, but they just don't have the players right now to be able to convert those chances, and that's really the major difference where Conte, there's no reason he should ever really be inside the 6-yard box. He's a phenomenal player. That's not his area of expertise, right? Or I would even argue some of their other players, like either Kovacic or Fernandes, they have been a tendency to be a little bit more wasteful because that's not their skill set. So it was a little surprising in terms of lineup, but it did work in terms of the performance. They did perform very well. They just didn't kind of clear out that opportunity. What do you think?
Yeah, very, very similar. Come on, how do you expect Conte, someone who's just coming back from injury, to be your main goal scorer, getting on the end of those chances? Very unfair to him because he did get, and as we know, he has the quality to find space, especially in that Real Madrid back line and get on the end of that. But it's just, echoing what you just said, that's just how Chelsea find themselves at the moment, not able to really score and even though they are creating many chances. So ultimately it was a 2-0 result for Real Madrid, which saw Chelsea out. But some questions about that Real Madrid back line. You mentioned it already, a lot of chances created by Chelsea, and one thing I noticed in the game, I'm not sure if it's something that's gonna, maybe it was just a couple moments in the game, but something that I think might come into play more, especially now that we know sort of the quarterfinals, the semi-final matchups. Modric found himself a lot on that right-hand side where you would typically find Valverde, and Valverde found himself more so centrally, which, Chelsea, we know their flaws at the moment, but, Madrid will be facing Man City, who have one of, if not the best midfield teams in the world. It'll be interesting to see what sort of tactical changes Ancelotti does, if any, considering that you're going to need legs. Valverde is there. very athletic, can win the ball back, can push the tempo if needed. Modric more so at this age, finding space around and just maybe relieving pressure with his sort of being able to find space behind the midfield and also his range of passing. So that was interesting for me. Apart from that, Rodrigo gets his goals, and Chelsea, I hate to point out Cucurella's mistakes again, but again, he was the one who lunged in and left Trevor Chalobah to be one-on-one with Rodrigo, who, hey, we all know what was going to happen. What were your thoughts on Rodrigo's goals and maybe even his celebration, the CR7 celebration?
I do want to say, when you say you hate, how dare you lie to the listeners like that? That's completely not true and not fair. I saw that smile across your face. Absolutely hilarious. I'd love to see Cucurella continue to mess around and kind of be the fraud that he is. My favorite part when he makes a mistake like that, I feel like he's the embodiment of imposter syndrome, where he's like, I shouldn't be here, right? No, where am I? What am I doing here? Absolutely correct. Should not be there. This is not the level of kind of competency he should be playing at, to be fair. In regards to Rodrigo, absolutely vital, because going forward, I feel like it's going to be quite an interesting matchup between Manchester City and Real Madrid. And I think he could potentially be an X factor along with Vinicius, who played very, very well on the left-hand side, because I was kind of talking about when we teed up in the first part of the podcast with those matchups of attacking aggressive wingers that are able to get in behind and take players one-on-one. Rodrigo did a phenomenal job in regards in the initial setup to be able to blow up to the first goal, and Vinicius on that left-hand side has been a terror and even terrorized Manchester City last year in the Champions League. So those two players, I feel like, are going to be the most important. And as you mentioned, in terms of the rotation with Modric playing in that midfield, it'll be interesting to see, because if, for example, there is, let's just say, the lackluster defensive effort, midfielders not kind of tracking back in position against a Man City team that we've seen how they play, especially at home in the Champions League, it's going to be dangerous times for Real Madrid. So that's something that, you can get away when you're playing against Chelsea, considering especially how poorly Chelsea have been playing recently. But against a Man City team, you really can't do that. So it'll be interesting if those adjustments are still there, or do they revert more back to kind of what they did last year in the Champions League? Well, even though Valverde will start off as the right wing, he'll play more withheld, and their only hope to really break out is Vinicius one-on-one against likely a John Stones or an Akanji, which you would favor Real Madrid potentially in that matchup, right? So interesting here. But in regards to the one thing, like I said, so that's why it's good that Rodrigo got on the board. Love that Ancelotti is willing to kiss his players after they score a lot of goals from him in the Champions League. Big ups to him. Man has no shame. Love to see it. I want to give the credit to the young lad who's doing very, very well. But he's going to be, I feel like, potentially an X factor for them going into these next round of fixtures in the semifinals.
Yeah, and lastly, just to mention an interesting point as well, Eder Militao picked up a yellow card in this game, meaning that he will miss the first leg against Man City. Rudiger did come on for Real Madrid later in this game, and so likely he will start in that center-back partnership for Real Madrid against Man City. And hey, he was part of that Chelsea Champions League winning team against Man City, so we'll see what he's able to do, if he's able to do anything to stop sort of that attack. But we're going to touch on Man City as well. So right now we're going to take a quick break here, guys, and then we'll be back touching on the other quarterfinal matches. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We're going to continue our quarterfinal Champions League coverage with Inter Milan 3, Benfica 3. Mac, a game that we were sort of previewing as well as a game where Benfica needed to come out strong, given the fact that they were down 2-0 on aggregate. They did come out strong in terms of possession and chances, sort of in the first little bit. But, that goal from Barella, really a stinger in the Benfica side. Dzeko, proving that, very much like Giroud, you need a target just to hit, and he'll create some sort of chaos. What did you think about that Barella goal?
This was definitely in terms of the individual that the Barella goal, I think it's just, as you say, classical kind of build up number 9 traditional forward, where if you're going to have someone that's going to create that chaos, it's a good shout in the comparison between him and Giroud. I do tend to like Dzeko a little bit more, I'll be honest, so I might be slightly biased there. But overall, for me, if you were to kind of encompass this game as a whole, even though it seemed like an exciting 3-3, lots of goals, thrilling, for me, it never really felt like Benfica was going to come out and potentially turn this around, especially after that Barella goal. I understand that they kind of tie the game up in the 38th minute to be able to at least get level on the individual fixture, but it seemed like over the course of the time that if Benfica were going to continue to push, Inter Milan were going to have the quality up front to be able to put away their chances. And of course, the following goals from Martinez and Carrera both kind of really shut it down. So even though it was 3-3 exciting for the fans that showed up to be able to watch the match, overall for me, there wasn't too much in it in terms of the actual feeling I got from the individual matchup. Especially because I didn't mention this in the last podcast, but Benfica have actually never progressed from the Champions League quarterfinals in their history. This is the 6th time at the stage, and even in the individual ties. So of the 6 matchups in the 12 matches, never won even one. 5 ties, 7 losses. So it just seemed like history was against them. This first leg was against them, and unfortunately for them, it was a little bit too much of a hole to be able to dig out of, especially after the third of the goals came in from Inter Milan. What were your thoughts, I guess, holistically about the game? Did you enjoy the goal fest in that way, I guess? Did you bet the over, you gambling addict?
Hey, no, I did not have any money on this game, but I definitely should have. With the team needing to come out and try to get some goals. Unfortunate for Benfica to concede within the first 20 minutes, but as you said, really second half, the way it started for Inter, they were much more on the front foot as opposed to how we saw the first half ending for Benfica. And from that point on, the know-how and even just the movement up front for DeMarco, Correa, and even Mkhitaryan. Hey, that's what you get with sort of some of these experienced players from Inter. Unfortunate for Benfica, but yeah, definitely a great job from them, from Inter, going forward at those specific times. My only question would be, Mac, and we did cover already AC Milan and how good Rafael Leao was. Ronaldo, the left back for Benfica, looked like he was having a lot of fun down that right hand side, and now Denzel Dumfries is a great attacking wingback. Inter Milan play a back 3, but Matteo Darmian played as a right center back and against AC Milan, and the way Rafael Leao was able to tear Napoli's back line apart, I think there's going to be some chances and some goals coming up from that fixture. Very poor goals to concede at the end, Mac, from Inter. Is there anything? Am I looking too much into that? Should they be worried at all, or was it the game pretty much done and it was just them just seeing it out?
So I would. I'm a 99% of the way there with you in terms of kind of their mentality. The effort that they put in was great, but they kind of let their hand off the rope in ways where in going into a semifinal matchup, you can be a little bit worried. It's like, even if they do have a lead, are they going to kind of let it slip through their fingers? Because they've done in this fixture, so far this season, they haven't had, let's say, their best season. The interesting part, though, it's a derby. It's Milan versus Milan, Milan versus Inter. Milan versus Milan. Anyway, the point is they're from the same city and they're rivals. And when in a lot of different ways, to use the cliches, you throw out the record book, you throw out the game plan. There's going to be a lot of competitive juices flowing. There's going to be a lot people sticking to the challenges. I think this is the first time since this is only actually the second time that 2 Italian clubs will actually reach and face each other in the semifinals. The other 3 to be able to do so, it's Inter Milan, Juventus, and Milan. I think that was in 2002-03. So it's absolutely impressive and that was 3 teams made it to the semifinal round. This time 2, and they're actually facing each other and their local rivals. So you can see where maybe sometimes in that individual game plan, it might go out the window where players might not stick to their assignment. But in a lot of ways, and why I'm almost all the way there with you, is because that further kind of gives me proof where Rafael can be that destructive force on that left-hand side for AC Milan, where the right-handed side of Inter are going to be too aggressive, where Matteo Darmian is not was never the greatest right back initially defensively, then being able to stuck it, be in a position of like, do I stay, do I go? I think that's going to be the matchup to really decide it, because on that break, in these individual matchups, again, across two legs, there's going to be enough opportunities where he's going to create havoc and cause a lot of problems for an Inter Milan defense that definitely has looked shaky so far.
Sure, very interesting match that we'll preview more when the time comes. But yeah, as you mentioned it, same teams from the same city. San Siro will have both home and away legs for both teams, and so very, very much looking forward to that. A lot of people will agree, though, the winner of this semifinal fixture will likely go on to be the runners-up for the Champions League, because the next tie we're going to discuss, Mac, now is Bayern 1, Man City 4-1 on aggregate for Man City, and they move on to that semifinal against Real Madrid. A lot, I guess, brighter start for Bayern in this game. Choupo-Moting did start up front. Same double pivot that Bayern ran with Goretzka and Kimmich for this game as well. And Cancelo started as a left back. A lot more, I guess, possession and chances in the first half for Bayern, as we expected. But Man City were able to, find their times and play their ways out of pressure very, very impressively. What did you think of this game?
I thought this showed a lot of how Manchester City have been approaching away fixtures in the Champions League, where they've been comfortable, even though they necessarily haven't been as dominant. In some aspects going into previous legs, they've been dominant on the ball, not really trying to go for kind of the jugular, where they could potentially expose themselves on the counter, where they've been comfortable either playing back in reserve defensively or in possession, just being able to make sure that they can keep the tempo at their pace, because they know they can dominate on their home leg, which they did already against Bayern in the reverse fixture here. So they knew going in, hey, if we just kept things simple, maybe ping away at some opportunities, and what now they have is that additional threat that they've never really had, is on that break, on the counter, with a striker that wants to get in behind, wants to be able to win that long ball, and it's kind of reverse what you think of what Pep's football would have been, where it was a long ball to Erling Haaland, knocked down to KDB, reverse right back to him. As basic as you get, kind of big man, small man, little lineups that you would have seen in the 4-4-2, a la the early 2000s, late 90s era, right? In terms of how you kind of would have approached that first goal. So we've never would have seen that really from this Manchester City team. So they can be confident knowing we can play this different system, still stick to our kind of our our thought process of how we want to be able to approach game, the principles you want to play with in terms of winning possession. But we have this different element that we didn't have before, where we don't have to be 100% all in all the time. So definitely a phenomenal performance from the City team. Even though scoreline finished 1-1, realistically, they could have won 3-0 again in this fixture if things just kind of shook out a little bit differently for them. So definitely a team that going into, and while you highlighted it, going against a Real Madrid team, which I think it's 11 of the last 13 years Real Madrid have made the semifinals. I think it's something like that, where it's a dangerous matchup for both teams, and both teams are expecting to win. And if they win that fixture, they think they already have a hand on the trophy.
Yeah, and so impressive. This game for Man City, as you pointed out, not as expected with the 3-0 lead from the first game. Not expected to dominate possession, and very, very impressed overall with Pep's game management. Defensively, as a unit, looked impenetrable. Bayern Munich were resulting to shots from distance, wide angles, half chances. Yes, they were lacking sort of like a Lewandowski up front, and that's very much highlighted with the pass in the 70th minute from Musiala. He beats I think it was Gundogan on a one-on-one, sets up Kimmich, who's at the top of the box. You'd expect him to put some quality either on a shot or to thread the ball through to maybe a running winger or forward. He just chips it and is unable to find Choupo-Moting, and well defended from Man City throughout both legs. Very, very solid job, even with a new formation. And what stood out to me even more than that is just Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish, the way they're able to manage games as well, knowing when to sort of slow games down, take pressure away from defense on some of those counterattacks. And Yeah, just a great level of maturity from this Man City team, and I think it's fair to say, though Madrid are the holders of the Champions League, they should Man City, just the way that they're able, what they've added to this team, should look at themselves as favorites. What did you think about some of those penalty calls, though, Mac? The one where Holland misses in the first half, and also the one that is eventually given to Bayern for that handball on Akanji.
I think both of them on level were definitely handballs and correct calls. The first one, specifically on Upamecano, that was a great spot from the referee because the commentators going in, no one had recognized it, and even some of the Manchester City players. Normally, when you see a clear-cut penalty, you see 11 players really chasing down the referee. It was only one or two that kind of made an approach, but the referee was on it right away. So it was a great call there. Holland, of course, I think the call directly after he missed the penalty was, he is human, it's in kind of a surprise that he did miss. It's the first miss that he's had as a penalty taker for Manchester City thus far. But you could see the delay tactics that a lot of players do. My favorite one is the grass. It was like, oh, a little piece of the grass has come off the turf. We shall fix it. Even though it was not near the penalty shot spot whatsoever, just to further delay it. Love the shithousery. And who knows, it maybe it got to Holland's head, maybe it didn't. Maybe the pressure of playing like at Bayern, in Bayern, previously playing for Dortmund may have got to him in that moment. But he definitely made up for it later. But overall, that penalty was on definitely kind of a correct call and the correct decision. And going forward, he'll still probably nail that 9 times out of 10 going forward. The funny part is Joshua Kimmich tried the exact same penalty and was successful in it, straight down the middle with a decent amount of power. So you kind of love maybe it wasn't kind of on purpose shithousery. Maybe that's generally where he does take his penalties. Because to be honest, I haven't seen him take a whole lot of penalties before. Because previously before it would always be Lewandowski and if not Thomas Muller, right? So it was interesting to see him take it. But he tried the exact same thing, but was successful. Unfortunately, it was really only a consolation prize. But overall, definitely a strong performance from City. And I think you highlighted where even though we would all agree the two best teams are facing each other, Man City this year, the kind of the pedigree that they have, how well they've been playing in the Champions League, should see themselves as more of a favorite going into that matchup against a team with a history such as Real Madrid, which is a lot to say for how well they're playing.
Yeah, for sure. Lastly, just to mention, Bayern now out of this year's Champions League. I guess a lot of people, especially in Germany, will look at it as a big disappointment. That fact that they're out, especially sort of the manner. You kind of mentioned you don't know if Holland took it personally when he missed that penalty. I would argue he did. The way after he scored his goal, the only Man City goal in this game, he was shushing the crowd in Bayern. So that's very interesting. But someone who I do feel a little bit hard for, Upamecano, who mistakes from the first game and in this game as well. He's the one who slipped, allowing Holland to go through. Still a relatively young defender. Will be turning 25 this year, and a lot of time ahead of him with Matthias de Ligt at center back partnership for Bayern. So that's not a big concern. But I guess just a quick word on that, Mac. How important will it be for Bayern next season to find that number 9 to help them? Because I think a big glaring issue for them this round was, or this time around, is sort of not having Lewandowski or an out-and-out striker that could score for them. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with you. I think that's the biggest piece of the puzzle that they're missing at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how they address it. A lot of the hopes was to see if this season, if Sadio Mane would be able to come in and kind of make that position his own, which I think we would all agree. And if you would ask Leroy Sané, he would agree. It's definitely not his going forward, and he's definitely a doubt there. Because if you look at this back line, I understand Joao Cancelo played at the left back position. If you subs in Alphonso Davies in there, 3 of your back 4, and in all likelihood, Bayern's plans for the long term, 3 of your back 4 are under the age of 25 at the moment, and Pavard's 27. So it's not as if they have an extreme amount of experience, but they have a back line that's going to grow. They had midfielders with quality. Joshua Kimmich is still he's not an old player. Leroy Sané, Serge Gnabry, even though it seems like Kingsley Coman's been around forever, he's not on the wrong side of 30, so he still has a lot of time to be able to play well for this team. There is just that one piece where I understand Bayern are in a transition phase right now. Potentially Neuer or Thomas Muller, kind of the last remaining of the old guard for Bayern, are slowly being phased out of the team. Of course, Neuer was injured. Thomas Muller has been used as a substitute, and I wouldn't be surprised going forward if he would be in a similar position. But they'll definitely need to address that. I'll be curious to see how they do it. I wouldn't be surprised if Manchester United do kind of tag on to Harry Kane, where the rumors immediately go for Osimhen to go to Bayern, depending on the price tag. Where something like that, where this might be the first season where they have to go and spend an abundance amount of money for that level of quality of a number 9 player, because unfortunately that player, when they signed Lewandowski previously, is not going to come on the cheap anymore. So and even though that's traditionally not what the Bayern Munich team has done, normally they've kind of just pillaged their domestic league. I don't know if there's that quality of player available to immediately shoe into this number 9 to then make them a potential challenger in the future years for the likes of this Manchester City team.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly what I would have said. Just pillage someone from the German league, but hey, who knows what's going to happen? And I feel like they want to win now, so it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward. But yeah, as we mentioned, Man City through facing Real Madrid in the semis, and both teams from Milan, AC Milan and Inter, making up that second semi-final. So we'll preview that when time comes. But also taking place this week, Mac, was the Europa League quarterfinals as well, and we gotta mention it. Man U were in action against Sevilla. Disappointing for them to lose a 2-0 lead in their first tie at home, but not a great performance as a team in this one against Sevilla. Mac, what were your overall thoughts on that game?
If I could play a laughing track right now, just of a minute, just me laughing as I was doing throughout watching the game, I would do that, because it definitely was. With the last couple of weeks, this might have been my favorite game to watch, just because of the enjoyment of you seeing a team kind of collapse from underneath them and the pain Manchester United fans were going through that game, just like by secondhand appreciation of their pain in some ways. Do you know what I mean? And kind of just enjoying it. So overall, phenomenal game from Sevilla. But in all seriousness, I think this, because one of the main reasons why, in my opinion, Manchester United played so poorly in this game, you saw Ten Hag had to revert back to what players were available to under previous management. This is a result you would have seen against Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because the lineup that he used, majority of were the same players that he had available at that time, where you had to be able to play Lindelof, that you had to be able to play Harry Maguire. In midfield, yes, you had Eriksen and Casemiro, but their main number 10 that they played with thus far this season, Bruno, was not available. Their best player this season, Rashford, only can come on as a substitute, even though he's been injured. And in all actuality, if Manchester United had won the first leg, probably would never have seen this pitch to be able to go in and play, because he didn't want to be able to risk him. So you saw a lot of the flaws of previous management and how certain players, when they were playing well, the likes of Martinez, Varane, Bruno, even like I said, Rashford, when they're available and they're fully fit, they can bring this team up to a higher level of standard. And that drop off below is too much. And something that you even mentioned in our group chat, just talking about this game, is that Ten Hag goes to the board and just shows us in this game, say, hey, I need to fix goalkeeper, I need to fix central defense. I have so many areas I need to fix, and I've been putting band-aids on them in the short term, and that's why we've done so as well as we've done thus far this season. But there's still so much work that needs to be done. So even though if you're a Man U fan, you're upset by the result, and especially the manner that it did happen, I think it further illustrates why you kind of want to see even more control to Ten Hag, given how well majority of his signings have done coming into this club. So even though short-term pain, long-term, I think this might be in some ways a benefit, where they do maybe have more of an urgency to reinvest into the club and bring in some more players to be able to help this team out, because after that first level of players, the first stringers, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that drop off is huge, and so a lot of injuries being picked up, and it's a crucial time in the season. So we'll see how they do. We'll touch a little bit more, I guess, in the next segment. But just to wrap this up, Sevilla, the winners of this tie, will face Juventus in their semifinal, and Bayern Leverkusen will face Jose Mourinho's Roma in the other semifinal. So, Jose Mourinho has a chance to win yet another European trophy. So, just wanted to mention that because he's I think it's fair to say a House of Footy favorite for all of us. So
the chosen one doing chosen one things for sure.
Exactly. So let's take another break here, Mac, and then we'll be back touching on some of the weekend's games. So stay with us. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We're going to finish off the podcast for today, just previewing this weekend's upcoming games. Firstly, the FA Cup semifinals are taking place, and the first matchup is Man City versus Sheffield. A game, Mac, where we kind of, it's fair to say Man City are the favorites for this game. I expect a heavy rotation for Man City. It is important to note, I didn't mention this in the last part, but Nathan Ake did pull up with an injury. So it looked like he will probably miss some time. Rodri has been looking like he's been playing a lot of minutes this season, and expect definitely some rotation there. And lastly, Erling Haaland, we know how Pep likes to rotate Alvarez in as well. So heavy rotations, but I think it's still fair to say Man City should be favorites for this one. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. It's all tuning up to the fixture against Arsenal on the 26th. So normally you would have had, if it was kind of this matchup playing over on the weekend, then you might get a further break to go to the next weekend before you have to play another game. But their fixtures are coming hard and fast for Manchester City. So I wouldn't be surprised if they really have to pick between putting out their best lineup for this game or that game. And I would definitely agree their focus more so would be on the Premier League and have a little bit of a weaker lineup because they could potentially get away with it. I wouldn't be surprised if you seen, for example, like Haaland start, Kevin De Bruyne start, because they have the potential to get up early and 2-3-0 in the first half. And Haaland, it was interesting. So the comparison for me is, it was kind of that Steph Curry, maybe in like 3-4 years ago, where people will be talking about, oh, he only plays like 30 minutes a game. How can he still be part of the MVP conversation? It's because he wins the game in the first 30 minutes. He doesn't need to play the rest of it, right? And a lot of these Manchester City players are in a similar position where they've been able to kill teams out, where at halftime, hey, let's bring on the subs. It's all calm, cool, collected. So I wouldn't be surprised if you still see some of the bigger names playing. But I think you're spot on certain positions where if there are going to be a rotation, if there's not going to be a rotation, it's going to be a quick pull, depending on those players, where we might see, even though he hasn't played regularly thus far this, I'll say since 2023, Kyle Walker come in to be able to start off in a full back position. And maybe Calvin Phillips plays along in a double pivot with Rodri, and then Stones come on later. Something like that. There is going to be more of a rotation. Maybe Morris comes in and playing for Bernardo Silva, who's been playing phenomenal on the right-hand side. Or who knows, maybe someone on the left, maybe a Cole Palmer. Doubt that. That's probably too much of a reach. But there's definitely going to be a heavy rotation in this game, and I think it's going to be vital for Manchester City to get an early lead so they can continue that on for the rest of the game, because even though you don't want to look ahead to further fixtures, they need to.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised. Bernardo Silva's been playing recently, and we did see as well earlier this season Bernardo Silva start as a left back and then invert as a midfielder. So Pep will get creative, and I'm very excited to see that. Though I think the result should be Man City going through, and if they do, they will face the winners of Brighton versus Manchester United, which is the second semi-final match, and this one is quite interesting. Brighton obviously coming off of a very impressive away win at Chelsea, firing on all cylinders from back to front, looked like a very, very solid team throughout, and especially against a wounded and short on players Manchester United team. I actually think they have a very strong chance of going through. What are your thoughts on this game?
Absolutely. This is definitely the most, arguably since the beginning of the season, this has been the worst run of form for Manchester United, and it comes at the worst time. Just as it's kind of the complete opposite of the run of form going into the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle, where everything was going well for them, and Newcastle kind of fell apart due to injuries, red cards, things like that of that nature. And the same thing is happening to Manchester United. In all likelihood, we're probably not going to see. We're definitely not going to see Martinez. We may not get 100% fully fit Rashford. Who knows if Varane's back? I think Bruno same. No, Bruno had a yellow card accumulation. That's why he missed Europa League, right? So then I think he'll probably be back in. But this Brighton team on the other side are flying. They're playing very, very well, playing competition that traditionally you might see as overreach, where they've not just played well against them, they've battered them and have played phenomenally well. And Brighton have actually won the last 2 meetings against Manchester United in all competitions. So they should feel very confident going into this fixture. So I 100% agree where this can be a danger, and it's going to be interesting in the span of a week. Within a couple of weeks, Man U out of the Europa League, potentially out of the FA Cup. So this is very much a trying time where they're going to need strong performances from players that we've not seen a whole lot of out of them this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that fixture for sure.
Yeah, not the best timing for Man U. As you mentioned, could be potentially out of 2 competitions, and very, very vitally as well. The next game we're going to cover is the 2 teams that are sort of battling it out for that top 4 position. So Man U, I guess the best hope for them is to get a decent result, maybe a 1-0 win or just scrape through in this game without any injuries, because Newcastle and Spurs are facing each other this weekend. And this is a big, to use a cliche, 6-pointer. Newcastle currently 3 points ahead of Spurs with a game in hand. But, things can change quickly. Both these teams won the week before last week, but they're now coming into this week with a loss. Newcastle to Aston Villa and Spurs to Bournemouth. And so both will be looking to not just get back onto winning ways, but inflict damage to the other team in terms of their top 4 hopes. So how do you see this game playing out, Mac?
This is, I think you're spot on in terms of this being kind of a real 6-pointer, because Tottenham now have back-to-back games that are really going to decide their season, first against this Newcastle team, and then following up against Manchester United in the following week, where if they come out and win both those games, they're in with a shout to be in the top 4. I feel like if they don't come out with at least 4 points, it's all gone. So this first matchup is absolutely vital, where they need to come out and not just kind of play well in spurts, which they have done, or in most cases rely on kind of a get out of jail free card with a Harry Kane goal to be able to edge them out. They need to be able to play well and put it in a very, very good performance, because it's not just that they're 3 points back, but they played an extra game. So the games are running out here where it's not going, you don't have as much time to make up the pace where previously towards the beginning of the season, where you kind of can be a little bit more rosy with looking towards the future. So I think this matchup is going to be absolutely important. I think what's going to be interesting and probably the key for me is who's going to win the midfield battle. That generally has a huge play on who's going to win games, but more so than ever for me in this fixture, because I would argue that's probably the weakest part of both teams, especially with Bentancur out for Tottenham. So you're relying on probably a Skip or Højbjerg midfield pivot versus Bruno Guimaraes, and both players beside him, either a Joe Willock or Longstaff, on their day can't look decent enough, but don't necessarily have the greatest of quality, or even Joe Linton, depending on which midfield Eddie Howe decides to be able to run. So I think that's going to be a key factor. If either a Bruno potentially or even a Højbjerg can kind of dictate the tempo of the game, get their team in possession, help break down team between lines of teams, and see if they can get their team on the front foot. So overall, I think this is a fascinating fixture with a lot of implications for how the rest of the season is going to play out. So very excited. That's going to be a very exciting day, I think, as you talked about, is where that game for us in Canada is at 9 a.m. and it follows up right after with the FA Cup game. So I'm going to be glued to my TV on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. Just looking it up, I totally agree. The midfield battle is going to be very, very important. And also, I think who will start up front for Newcastle, given the fact that Alex Isak has been on great form. Even though he didn't score in the last game, he's been a bright spot for Newcastle. And though Callum Wilson will give you goals when you need it, I think Isak will probably be the better option. And so I'm interested to see how he'll handle that shaky Spurs defense. But the thing I was looking up, Mac, while you were sort of giving me your takes, Aston Villa and Brighton are not too far off of Spurs and Newcastle, and Brighton and Aston Villa have to play both Newcastle and Spurs in their remaining fixtures. So a lot could happen. A lot of these teams could be taking points off of each other, and Man U as well will be facing Brighton in sort of some of their upcoming fixtures. So very, very exciting times in that race for the top 4 positions. Still looks like a lot to play for. So what else can we ask for? That's pretty much the way we sort of wanted this season to end, when there's still a lot to play for. So on that note, Mac, I think it's fair to say we're going to conclude our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias at @houseup_footies, where you find us. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Tuesday, when we review this weekend's Premier League games and FA Cup games. On that note, thank you, Mac.
Peace out.
And see you guys soon.